Hello, I'm Louise Elizabeth Robertson and I've written a story called We'll Survive and the Woadies, which you can read along with me on www.talesIlove.com. Now, we are on chapter 1 and this is Chaptet 2, Things Change. So I hope you enjoy. I do make a few mistakes, but this is chapter 2, Things Change of We'll Survive and the Woadies. Life was ticking along pretty well for Will. Honestly, she really had no problems. School was good, her friends were great, she had lots of fun things to do every week. She even lived in a really comfortable home next to the ocean. There was always good food to eat, as well as exciting treats such as birthday parties and holidays. In fact, she was living the dream, living an ideal and some would say privileged childhood. Even the activities she engaged in seemed to say so too. Taekwondo on Monday, pottery class on Wednesday, and she played different ball games on Saturday depending on the season. Will also had lots of cool stuff to occupy her, including her skillful skateboarding, vinyl TV character collection, cool apps on her electronics, but most of all her books. Will loved books. Her preferred book was usually a book with information and pictures, you know the type, books that explain the how, why, what, where and when of things. Her mum said that Will was like an information sponge, soaking up facts and figures and knowledge. In saying all this, having all these opportunities did not mean that she was of bad character. In fact, she was one of the kindest girls, and it's not often that we meet people like this in stories. Oh yes, I forgot. Cinderella, of course, who was kind and sweet. Will's parents were great parents. They were really loving and kind, almost overprotective, but they worked hard. They were exceptionally busy people. Will did not know exactly what they did, but they were very serious and secretive about their work. They were always travelling to different countries. Interestingly, they never went travelling together. Will thought it must be because they did different jobs, but she didn't really know. The pattern was that sometimes Dad would go on a trip, and once he returned, then Mum would go off to some other far-flung place. Will thought that it was something to do with big business, as they always looked really stylish and smart, but she could never get either of them to explain what they did. So if anyone asked, Will kept it simple and said, business. But in reality, she had absolutely no idea. There were really cool benefits for Will, as her parents would always bring her something back from their travels. Boomerangs from Australia, blue darts from Papua New Guinea, and original catapults from China. All worked, and Will learned new skills. Then life would get kind of normal, and her parents would stay at home for a while and do things together, like yoga on the beach and jogging. Life was pretty settled. So all was good in Will's life until the whispering started. Will could not put her finger on the day it started. The whispering between her parents just sort of started one day, but it just increased, and it really began to be annoying. Will would walk towards the kitchen and hear the whispering, but as soon as she walked into the room, her parents would pretend that they were not even talking to each other. And it did not happen once. It kept happening. Will would walk into the dining room and the whispering would stop. She would walk into the TV room and the whispering would stop. Will could never hear exactly what they were saying, but she could tell that it was important, as the whispers were sort of serious, and so were the looks on her parents' face. Her mum also seemed to do this strange screwing up of her face when she talked, and her dad constantly shook his head in response. There was definitely something wrong, or something going on. Then the bombshell came. They were having dinner one evening. It was a particularly good dinner. It was what Will called the international mix. They often had this kind of meal when her parents had been home for a while. It was like they missed the exotic international food that they had on their travels. By the way, this particular international mix was nasi goreng from Indonesia and paella from Spain, and it seemed weird and like a lot of rice to Will. Anyway, back to the bombshell that Will's mum and dad were about to drop. It turned out that her mum and dad needed to go away together to work, and this had never happened before in her whole life. They needed to go away together, and someone needed to look after Will. Will was not very happy. Nobody had ever looked after her before. It had only ever been her parents. Basically, Will's life had been so safe that she had never been cared for by anyone other than her parents. The news to Will got worse. Will was going to have to stay with Aunt May. Will was horrified. And then, to make it even worse, it was going to be a whole 6 weeks. At this point, I can hear you saying, well, that's not exactly hardship. And actually, you're quite right. But we all know that often, once the world begins to change, it doesn't stop. And Will did not like change very much. So there we are, the end of Chapter 2. So there'll be another one very, very soon, and you can find out what happens when Will goes to Aunt May's. I'm really enjoying writing this story, and I know what's going to happen, and it's so exciting. So I hope to see you very, very, very soon. Bye.